The conference room was silent, too silent for comfort. Stood at the front, one hand resting lightly on the table, the other holding a sheet of notes he barely needed anymore. Weeks of preparation had led to this moment. Every idea had been refined, every detail carefully considered. He wasn't just presenting a plan, he was presenting a piece of himself. Faces around the table watched him, some attentive, some indifferent, some impossible to read. He took a steady breath and spoke clearly, confidently. This approach allows us to improve efficiency without increasing cost. If we adjust the process here. A chair scraped loudly against the floor. The interruption was deliberate. His voice stopped mid-sentence. Leaned back in his seat, arms crossed, a faint smirk resting on his face like it belonged there. He didn't look at immediately. Instead, he glanced around the room, making sure he had an audience. Then he spoke. "Interesting," said slowly, his tone carrying just enough amusement to sting. "But haven't we already tried something like this before?" Blinked, caught off guard. "I don't believe we've approached it this way," he replied carefully. Tilted his head, as if considering the answer, but the smirk didn't fade. "No, I'm pretty sure we have," he continued, "and it failed miserably." A quiet shift moved through the room. Felt it instantly. Eyes turned, not toward the idea but toward him. His grip tightened on the paper in his hand. "I think there's a difference," began, but cut him off again. "Or maybe," said, leaning forward now, voice sharper, "we're just repackaging old failures and calling them innovation." A few people exchanged glances. Someone coughed. No one intervened. The words landed harder than they should have. Not because of their logic, but because of their intent. This wasn't critique. This was exposure. And it was happening in front of everyone. Felt it then, the surge. It started in his chest, a sudden heat rising like fire searching for oxygen. His heartbeat quickened. His jaw tightened. The room seemed smaller, the air heavier. His mind reacted instantly. Say something. Shut him down. Show them he's wrong. A flood of responses rushed forward, sharp and ready. He could point out past mistakes. He could question his credibility. He could turn the room against him with just a few well-placed words. The power to respond was right there. All he had to do was take it. But beneath the anger, something else stirred, quieter but persistent. Awareness. Noticed his own reaction as if he had stepped slightly outside himself. He saw the tension in his body, the urge to defend, the pull of his ego demanding that he not be seen as weak. The room was still watching. Waiting. The silence stretched, but it wasn't empty. It was heavy with expectation. If he stayed quiet, they might think he had nothing to say. If he reacted, he might lose control. He stood at a crossroads that no one else could see. And in that moment, time seemed to slow. A memory surfaced, unexpected but clear. He was younger, sitting across from an old mentor in a quiet courtyard. The man had spoken calmly, almost casually, as if the words carried no weight. "People will try to provoke you," the mentor had said. "Not because you are weak, but because they want you to become like them." Had frowned back then, not fully understanding. The mentor had continued. "The moment you react without thinking, you hand them control. Your anger becomes their tool." The memory faded as quickly as it came, but it left something behind. A pause. Back in the room, leaned back again, confident now, expecting retaliation, expecting noise. His lips parted slightly. For a brief second, he almost spoke. He could feel the words forming, sharp, defensive, ready to strike. But then he stopped, not because he had nothing to say, but because he realized something simple and powerful. His words were not in his control. But this moment, his response was. The anger was still there, but it no longer commanded him. It became something he could observe instead of obey. His breathing slowed. His grip loosened. The heat in his chest began to settle, not disappear but quiet down. And then, instead of reacting, did something unexpected. He said nothing. He met gaze, not with hostility, not with submission, but with calm, steady awareness. No defense. No attack. Just silence. The kind of silence that isn't empty, but deliberate. The room shifted. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. Smirk flickered for a moment as if something hadn't gone according to plan. He had thrown the spark, but no fire had followed. Straightened slightly, his posture relaxed but firm. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, free of tension, free of urgency. I understand your concern, he said evenly. But this proposal includes elements we haven't tested before. I'd be happy to walk through those details. No edge. No defensiveness. Just clarity. The energy in the room changed. What had started as confrontation now felt different. Measured. Controlled. Continued his presentation, not rushing, not forcing confidence, but simply maintaining it. And something unexpected began to happen. People listened again. Not because he fought back, but because he didn't. Remained quiet this time. For the first time since the interruption, he had nothing to push against. Because had given him nothing to fight. No reaction. No emotional leverage. The meeting moved forward. But beneath the surface, something far more important had already happened. Had faced the moment where most people lose themselves. And instead of reacting, he had chosen. Not silence out of fear, but silence as control. And though no one said it out loud, the balance of power in the room had shifted. Not through force, but through restraint. Not through words, but through the absence of them. And standing there calmly, realized something he hadn't fully understood before. The strongest response is the one you choose, not the one your emotions demand. The meeting ended like any other. Chairs moved, papers shuffled, conversations resumed in low, casual tones as if nothing significant had happened. But for something had changed. Not in the room. Within himself. He walked out of the building slowly, the noise of the day fading behind him. The sky above was dim, painted in soft shades of evening. Cars passed, moved, life continued as always. But inside him there was an unfamiliar stillness. The anger hadn't vanished completely. He could still feel traces of it, like the fading heat after a fire. His words echoed faintly in his mind, trying to provoke a reaction that was no longer there. And that's when noticed something surprising. He wasn't replaying the moment to justify himself. He wasn't imagining comebacks. He wasn't building arguments he wished he had made. Instead, he felt calm. Not the kind of calm that comes from winning, but the kind that comes from not losing yourself. He stopped walking for a moment, standing at the edge of the street. Why does this feel stronger? He wondered. He had always believed that strength meant responding, defending, proving himself. That silence meant weakness. That calmness under attack meant submission. But today had challenged that belief. Because when spoke, the the real battle hadn't been between them. It had been within him. And for the first time, he had won that battle. That night sat alone, reflecting. He replayed the moment, not with emotion but with clarity. Had spoken harshly. That was a fact. But what mattered more was this. Had no control over his thoughts. No control over his emotions. No control over his response. Unless gave it to him. And that realization shifted something deep inside him. If I had reacted, he thought. He pictured it clearly now. A sharp reply, raised voices, tension escalating, the room dividing, the focus shifting away from ideas to conflict. And afterward, regret. Not because he would have been wrong, but because he would have been controlled. Controlled by someone else's behavior. Controlled by a moment of anger. Controlled by impulse. He exhaled slowly. That's the trap, he whispered to himself. It wasn't about who was right. It was about who was in control. In the days that followed, something subtle began to change. People started treating differently. Not dramatically, not openly. But it was there. A quiet respect. Colleagues who had once overlooked him now listened more carefully. Conversations with him carried more weight. Even silence around him felt intentional. And he hadn't apologized. But he hadn't attacked again either. In fact, there was hesitation now, a slight pause whenever he spoke around, as if he no longer knew how to provoke someone who refused to react. Because that was the truth had begun to understand. You cannot manipulate someone who controls themselves. But growth is never proven in comfort. It is tested again. And it wasn't long before faced another moment. This time it was more direct. More personal. A small group discussion, fewer people, less noise but sharper words. Spoke again, his tone edged with the same familiar intent. You always stay quiet when challenged, he said, looking directly at. Is it confidence or just avoidance? The question hung in the air. It was different this time. Not an interruption, but a direct challenge to his character. Felt it, the initial flicker of emotion. But it was weaker now. Quieter. More distant. Like a wave that rose but didn't crash. He noticed it. And that made all the difference. He didn't rush to respond. He didn't feel the same urgency to defend himself. Instead, he paused. Not out of uncertainty, but out of control. Then calmly he spoke. I speak when it adds value, he said evenly, not when it adds noise. No tension. No ego. Just clarity. The room fell silent. Not the uncomfortable silence from before, but a different kind. A reflective one. Looked at him searching for something. Anger, insecurity, weakness. But there was none. And for the first time, looked away first. That moment stayed with. Not because he had won, but because he hadn't needed to. He began to understand something deeper now. Silence was not about saying nothing. It was about saying only what mattered. Patience was not about waiting. It was about choosing the right moment. And self-control was not about suppressing emotion. It was about mastering it. Over time, this way of being became natural. Criticism came, but it didn't shake him. Insults came, but they didn't define him. Situations changed, but he remained steady. Because he had stopped trying to control what he never could. Other people. their words, their opinions, their actions. Instead, he focused on the only thing that had ever truly been his: himself, his thoughts, his reactions, his choices. One evening, as he walked through the same streets, the same noise surrounding him, felt something he had never felt before in such a clear way. Freedom. Not freedom from difficulty, not freedom from conflict, but freedom from being controlled by them. The world hadn't become quieter. People hadn't become kinder. Challenges hadn't disappeared. But none of that mattered anymore, because his peace no longer depended on them. He remembered the words from long ago. The moment you react without thinking, you hand them control. Now he understood the full truth of it. And more importantly, he had learned the opposite. When you choose your response, you take that control back. Kept walking, calm and steady, untouched by the noise around him. And in that quiet strength, there was power. Not loud, not visible, but unshakable. Because in the end, he had discovered something most people never do. You don't need to control the world to find peace. You only need to control yourself.